Voila, double bonus, recording live on Facebook. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you once again for joining us today. This is Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, joined by my effervescent co-host, Brian McNicoll.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
Yes, getting more so by the day, probably.
That's right.
All right, so we have what? Okay, so it's 83 days until the election. So the clock is ticking. We had a few more primaries yesterday and everything like this. But I guess the big news of the day, we should say, will center around Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, right? So Joe Biden made his big reveal. We've been waiting for this for weeks, really. And there's, some people like this and some people don't like this that are in the Democrat Party on the left and whatever. So, what's your take on this whole pick with Kamala?
Well, what the Democrats are saying is, she's gonna whip Pence in the vice president debate, and I'm like, well, I guess, you're trying to go 1 and 3. It says what it says, right? Because I think that embedded in that is sort of an admission that they're worried about the cognitive state of Biden. It looks like that when he told her, there was no speech, there was no ceremony. It was, he called her on the phone and he had to have a script for the phone call. To call someone and tell them, hey, you're going to be the vice president, you shouldn't need a script, right? So
please follow these words.
Right. I mean, that's kind of harsh, right? So, I think that, I think that the mental decline of Biden can't really be hidden anymore. And so, I think part of it is, she's going to make a lot of noise. She's going to, talk a lot. She's going to give speeches and so forth. She's going to be like the vitality they're trying to express through Biden. She has a lot of baggage. There's no question, she sort of slept her way to the top. That's kind of the one thing most people know about her. She held people in, if you watch the Tulsi Gabbard takedown during the debate, there's a long list of stuff there. And one of which is she held people in prison beyond their sentences to have cheap prison labor. I mean, you find those people, that should be some gold, right? She also is virulently anti-Catholic. And she has attacked, there was a judge in Nebraska who was trying to get come through his confirmation process. And she tried to disqualify him as a candidate because he was a member of the Knights of Columbus, and which is, as a Catholic organization, it's pro-life, So she tried to make being pro-life disqualifying for the federal bench. That's a pretty serious thing. Americans should never forget what she tried to pull on Brett Kavanaugh, right? Asking trick questions that she didn't even have the answers to and so forth. I think as a political figure, she is despicable. Okay. Now they're not trying to get me to vote for her. Okay. Now, but the other thing is, here's my question. They're not aiming that at me. I'm not going to vote for her. I would have voted for him no matter who he would have named as vice president. But what profile for me the voter who is added to the coalition by him naming Harris? Who is that voter who says, I was thinking about, I couldn't decide. Now that he has Harris on his ticket, I'm voting Biden. Who did that tip? What kind of person would have been pushed into the Biden camp by this appointment? I could see like Rice. She had some baggage too, and she may well be indicted by the time of the election. I understand why he didn't pick her, right? And there's a lot of questions. You don't know what Durham is going to do and all that, and I think that really worked against her. But the Richard Haas's of the world, the foreign policy mandarins would have said, hey, this is someone who does at least understand the game and provide some stability to Joe in those areas, right? So which is interesting that you would shore up foreign policy credentials when that's supposedly, he was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations, and he sort of built his career on that. But, he's in decline and they know it, and he's in decline in the polls and they know it. And he'll get a dead cat bounce here for naming her, for coming out with something. And the people who strong women who, yell things at people will jump on the wagon here. But I don't really see, I think they would have voted for Biden anyway. I don't really see like a lot of enthusiasm added here, or a big strategic get. He's probably going to win California anyway.
Right. And, and it used to be at least that a lot of times, picking the vice president candidate there was something that you were doing based on strategy that you were going to bring, as you were talking about. It's like, what's the coalition she brings? Yeah, he is going to win California. That's not going to really be in doubt. So, that doesn't really help him that way. She has her baggage. I mean, she's got a long political record as a prosecutor, and some as a senator, and some things, you've mentioned some examples there in terms of what some of the issues are. But here it was, is that she ran, in this campaign. She tried to make the run for the presidency, and she failed. She could not get the Democrats to vote for her. She couldn't bring the blacks, the Democrats, to her overall, right?
So she had a big rollout. There were 20,000 people in downtown Oakland to see her speech. It was a capable, splashy opening, right? And then by the time she got to Iowa, she didn't have the money to compete. She had less than 2% of the vote. She was one of the major, like, puzzling sort of disappointments of the Democrat field, right? I thought that, Democrats thought that she would be in the thick of it, whether she won it or not, for far longer than that. But she dropped out before Iowa. Now, there's a couple of things there that, happened then that wouldn't necessarily happen again. First of all, she's under someone else's direction now. She's not, forming the campaign, making the decisions herself. Her sister apparently got a lot of power the first time around and drove away a lot of key people and was a part of the problem. I don't know how much they're going to let her sister run things, in this situation. So, she has that behind her. And also she has some experience, like she does have some feeling for what didn't work. So she may be a little better candidate as in this role than she was before. But again, I just don't see who's joining the hayride as a result of her. I just don't get it.
Yeah, and there were, we could have said a lot of interesting things about some of the other ones that were in the mix. Anywhere from Karen Bass to Elizabeth Warren, Gretchen Whitmer, and all of these kinds of things. And there probably was some strategic value in some of those people compared to Harris. Plus, in the debates, I mean, Harris and Biden, Harris went after Biden big time. Right. And so, and I keep thinking in the back of my mind that, that little AP shot, of the notes that Biden had of thinking about, don't hold any grudges. So that's obviously, this is part of the thing on Harris, is that you can't hold any grudges. It does look to me that, he's looking at her as kind of the attack dog, because the campaign can say, yeah, putting Joe out there and putting him out, giving him a chance to speak, not a good idea. We need to have Kamala speak as much as possible, because she's the one who actually has her wits about her and will actually kind of frame the campaign. But that's just not a winning strategy, in my opinion, right, is to pin that on them, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're, I read people are saying, so they've set this up to be Trump against her, okay? And it's like, you can't, we assume that the president is going to run the country, right? And there may be circumstances that appear after the election when they don't or can't or whatever. But I mean, we're not electing a vice president here. We're electing a president. And to say, okay, well, you're voting for Joe, but you're really getting her, I think is, I don't know how you sell that. I think that's something, Trump can attack that relentlessly, and no doubt will. And, he said, of course, he had fun with it. He said she was his number one pick for Biden to get. So look,
tell me this, or, give me your opinion about this. Is she a better person to focus in on for the RNC to attack than Biden?
Well, it depends on how they deploy her, right? But I mean, I would attack Biden and I would ignore her if I were them, because Biden is who you're running against. And any attempt to insinuate her into the conversation, hey, it's really not just Biden. It's this, +1 deal like Bill and Hillary tried to do. Say, no, we're not electing +1. We're electing this guy. If he's not capable, you shouldn't vote for him.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
can the RNC at least, I don't know how successful this campaign will be for them if they try this, but I mean, is there a possibility that they try to sow the seeds of doubt to the American public about
That's what
Joe?
I'm saying. You
Yeah.
focus on him, and anytime she comes into it, you're just like, hey, is he not in charge? Who's in charge over there? Who's going to be the president on November 4th or January 20th if he wins, right? Is it him? Is it her? Is it some coalition? Is it some committee of people that we don't even know about yet? I would keep asking that question. I would keep making him say, oh, I will be in charge, and this is what I will do as being in charge, because he can't really do that. He can't really assert that now.
I mean, does Harris take on a role right now for a lot of people of just saying, kind of almost being a shadow president if Biden wins?
That's what I'm saying. It's like we should not accept that as Americans, right? This is subterfuge, and it's open, brazen subterfuge, right? They're promising you one thing, and they're going to give you something else. So, I think that's a tack line for Trump, and I think that the Democrats right now think that that's the way to sell this. It's like, don't worry so much about Biden being a little slow because we have her there in the background. But I think that, I don't think you can tell the American people, you can count on your president when you can't count on your president, right? I mean, Trump's going to be fine. There's no one sitting around worrying about what Mike Pence will do, right? Trump's going to be in charge. So, I mean, it's, our guy will be in charge. Your guy, we'll see, right? I don't know how that could be a winning hand.
Yeah, did Biden, box himself into a corner though with the pick? I mean, made a big deal about it was going to be a woman. It didn't necessarily have to be a woman of color, but what about James Clyburn? And maybe his influence and things like that, where Biden was basically not only had to he already put the woman thing out there, but then he was almost basically forced to look at a woman of color because of the pressure from the Jim Clyburn wing or those types of people with the NAACP, that type of thing.
And you really cannot have picked a worst person. If you're going to name a black woman for the purpose of addressing, he obviously has some problems now with black voters because he's had, made some gaffes that are pretty public and so forth. Okay, but if you're going to do that, right, you couldn't have picked a worse one because, I mean, she's known for abusing prosecutorial powers against black people, right? Of doing unfair things to black people in the name of law enforcement. How does Black Lives Matter enthusiastically go carry signs for her, right? How do they support this? How do they think this is okay? Because the things that they say they're working for, police and prosecutorial abuse, right? She's guilty. The public record is clear. So I don't know how they get anything like that out of her. I mean, I think that, of all the black people, and she's not really black, her father's Jamaican, her great grandfather was a slave owner. Her mother's Indian. But if you're going to try to walk down that road and make people think you've appointed a black person, she's the worst one you could have had. You'd been better off with Karen Bass. She can at least, be legitimate on the issue of police brutality or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and there are people. I mean, weren't there like 300 or so of the delegates or whatever that they were really pushing for Bass? They were and had made some noise about if it wasn't going to be Bass, they were going to make a stink about it. And after the Harris announcement, the progressive left, was not happy. I mean, Sean King and all these people, they were not happy with this, a lot because of what you were mentioning about her record with, as a prosecutor in criminal justice and things like that. So this is a problem, particularly I think when you have President Trump who can say, hey, look, I did criminal justice reform. I've been doing all kinds of things.
Yeah, I actually have some results to show.
Right. So
maybe not.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I did want to ask you though about Obama's statement about this, where he basically said that Biden had nailed it. Now, my initial thing is like, was was Obama going to criticize Biden no matter who he had chosen? Wouldn't
Right.
he have used that? And wouldn't he have said that anyway, no matter who it was?
Right, but I think they want an attacking posture out of this position, and they got that right. He didn't get a wimp. She'll be full bore on the attack, and she'll be nasty. She'll be aggressive and sassy and mean about it, like she was in the hearings. That's the other thing is like you think about when you watch Trump. There's a couple of exceptions. One was his inauguration speech. There's been a couple of other times as well when his visage, his mien, his bearing was not cheerful and optimistic and so forth. But for the most part, he's a sunny optimist. Things are getting better. Our best days are ahead of us. He says that all the time, right? Our best is yet to come, right? And, we're going to keep America great, make it even greater and so forth. So, that's what Americans look for, optimism. Yeah, things are not great now, but we can make them better, and, what they're going to be is things are not great now, right? They're dealing misery.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't see him as having helped himself a whole lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, and it's just, what about Michelle? I mean, there was some talk out there too about people who were disappointed that he didn't select Michelle, but I don't really think that was ever a serious consideration. Do you?
I don't think that, first of all, experience is undervalued in this, right? People get in it and they think, Trump won without ever having been in politics before, but he'd been on TV and he had been in the public eye for 40 years or more, right? So he wasn't new to being interviewed and answering questions he didn't expect and so forth. But it takes experience to do this, and she really doesn't have the experience. And the other thing is, I think that her posture toward Biden tells you what the Obamas really think of him, right? So they're not going to say anything bad, and they're going to support the party, and it's going to look, pro forma, like, Obama's his successor and his handpicked vice president, or, carrying forth his legacy and all that, because they know there are people who will buy into that narrative that, that one of their avenues here is to be the third term of Obama, right? So there's a certain amount of people who could do that, who there's a certain amount of people who would latch onto that. That would be an imprimatur for them. But he's got a problem on this.
Well, they thought a lot of those Democrats thought they were going to get a third term of Obama in 2016, and that didn't happen, did it?
And they still think they will. But I don't ever think. I think Obama, he saw Biden as a safe pick who would not cause any harm. Right? He was running on his own stuff, being the first black president and transforming this and that and the other. But Obama, Biden didn't turn anybody away, right? Mainstream Democrat at that time, no longer, now a hard left Democrat. But I don't think he ever had a lot of respect for Joe, and I don't think he's going to let his wife go get beat, right? Because they're going to lose.
All right. So moving on to the Democratic National Convention that's coming up. So we're going into this very weird period here this month where we're going to have the Democrats and Republicans having their conventions, but they're basically going to be virtual. We're going to have speeches. The DNC kind of released a list of people that'll be speaking there. There'll be the Obamas will be there, the Clintons will be there. AOC, so they've elevated AOC. They're kind of throwing a sop to that wing, the progressive left wing there, to give her the national stage, as much as it is a national stage if you're doing it virtually. But what I thought was interesting too was that Andrew Yang, who was a very interesting candidate when he was running for on the Democrat ticket, seemed to have been disappointed. He tweeted out that he thought he was going to be included and he wasn't. Is that a
Some
mistake
of
by
the
the
early
Democrats?
lists I saw, he was on to speak. So
Yeah,
I
well,
think that, I think it's possible. I'm not sure about this, but I think it's possible. What happened is that, Harris being added to the ticket bumped him, right? That ended his speaking opportunity. I thought he was interesting too, but he's not really saying what they're saying.
right.
And I don't think I go along with the characterization that having AOC there is a sop to the left, right? I think the whole thing, there's the unity document between him and Bernie where, Biden's a blank slate when it comes to policy. He doesn't know about it. He's too old to get in the weeds and figure out what he really wants to do. And so he's kind of been handed a policy package by the Bernie bros, right? So he's signed up to be as far left as Bernie. So when he has AOC there, I mean, she's his energy advisor on his campaign, right? And she is top energy advisor. She's pushing for Green New Deal and all this kind of stuff. So I mean, the notion that he's a centrist Democrat, would not be a whole lot left of center is nonsense. If you look at what he's actually saying he would do as president.
Yeah, I will rephrase that, and I'll say that her appearance is really what it is. It's indicative of how far left the Democrats have gone or are going.
Right.
If you're going to elevate her to that level, this is a telltale signal of what is going on here, and that.
And to be fair, she's done a good job being 29 years old and getting herself in the spotlight.
Oh yeah. No, I mean that's the thing. I mean, she's been great at self-promotion. She's been great at putting things together. They created the squad. I mean, those are good gimmicks that work. And that squad of 4, could wind up expanding. I don't, if it gets bigger, they may want to have change the name of it. But they have had some success in the primaries this year with these far left progressive Democrats knocking off the incumbents. And, if you're Nancy Pelosi, you're like, what's going on here? You're going to have to pay attention to them if they're growing. If she can't tamp them down, she's going to have to live with it. But that is to me a potential death knell for the Democrats if they wind up shifting that far left, because then the difference between Republicans and Democrats becomes extremely stark. And I think for a lot of voters to me, in my opinion, would be more of a no-brainer. They won't be as close in. You'll just have one here and one here, and it's like, yeah, no, these guys are reasonable. These guys, what happened here?
I'll tell you what, it's like I've seen, like, in my social media feeds and stuff, more in the last 2 weeks than ever before, people saying, I don't like Trump, but they're not giving me any choice. I have to vote for him. So, I think that people are starting to look at it and saying, one of these candidates is sort of within the mainstream of the American political experience, and one of them is adrift and being pulled out of the mainstream. So, and not strong enough as a leader to right that ship and do it. So,
yeah, no, I mean, it's just that, if Biden really wanted, had a man of principle and was going to stick to his guns, he would go ahead and continue along a centrist path, and he would propose a moderate centrist platform and policy agenda and things like that. But instead, he has given this over to the Bernie bros to the left and let them
people to the left of the Bernie bros. I mean,
yeah,
Kamala is her voting record is to the left of Bernie's.
Yeah. So as a result, we can see where the party is. I don't know if the Republicans are going to succeed, but they really need to push and really remind people and show people just those stark differences as to how far Joe is off of where he used to be. He is not, don't listen to Jill Biden says, he's still a centrist, baloney. We all know that. You look at this unity thing, no way. There's just no way in heck that this is a centrist platform at all for the public to have.
That's right.
So, okay. So the other thing about the convention too is just that John Kasich. Okay.
Who cares? They always have Zell Miller. They always have somebody who's, they're mad about what happened to them within the party. So they go give a speech for the Democrats. And John Kasich was a non-factor in 2016. It was a non-factor in 2012. Voters don't want him, and they're not, Democrats can enjoy it. And, he's not going to say anything he hasn't been saying since Trump came down the escalator. So enjoy yourself, but you were never going to be anything more than you've already been in the Democrat Party, and now you for sure won't be.
Is it? Yeah, I mean, for Kasich though, I mean, is this some kind of weird, last ditch attempt to make himself relevant of some sort, to say
Trump stole his girlfriend somewhere along the line,
Yeah, but I just wonder if Kasich is not done running for political offices and trying to find a way to get back into the conversation somehow.
Right. Maybe as a Democrat, maybe Kasich is the future. He always, he's sort of, you got to govern from the middle and all this stuff. Maybe he's ready to cross to the other side of the middle. There's no one there. If you can get in that space, so you can get into the moderate Democrat space, you kind of have that to yourself right now. There's not a lot of them out there.
All right, I know this is one of your favorite outfits, 538. So they released something that apparently popped up this morning that is giving Biden a 71% chance of beating Trump. I know you watch a lot of polls and look at a lot of things. 538, they have some cred, but they don't have but their 2016 prediction didn't really work out, did it?
Yeah, they're not all that accurate. I mean, what he does is, and where he gets is he gives all the polling results he receives more or less equal weight. Okay, so there are polls where there are people polled are adults. Okay, they don't ask any children. Okay, but any old adult. So like you're at college, you go sit in the student union of your college, and everybody you see there eating a hamburger, you go up and ask them, what do you think about, who you're going to vote for? Well, okay, 94% Biden, here in my college cafeteria, right? That's not polling, So the more money that is spent on conducting the poll, and the most expensive way is likely voters, right? It takes the longest to find. They're the most difficult to identify, and so forth. But the more you are on, spending to have an accurate poll, the more Trump is favored in your poll. So, they can say what they want, but the fact of the business is, Trump is pulling ahead. I guess it was the Daily Mirror reported on a big series of polls that they commissioned that said Trump has caught up, has passed Biden in all the battleground states and overall. And although Biden may be able to keep it close, it looks like he's topped out. There's really not a lot of supporters for him to add, whereas Trump is adding, And then when you look at, like I was in Old Town Alexandria the other day. I went all through Old Town. I had to go 3 or 4 places down there and drove all over town. I saw one Trump sign. I saw no Biden signs. Now you say 1-0, statistically significant or whatever. Alexandria is 36-1 Democrat.
Yeah.
So if you,
isn't that bad?
Yeah.
I knew it was. I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah. So when you say they have, when there's more, even if it's 1-0, there's more Trump signs than Biden signs. That's got to send alarm bells. The enthusiasm gap. Trump has 71% of the voters are enthusiastic about voting for him. 73%, I'm sorry. 41% of Biden's voters say they're enthusiastic about voting for him. You only get one vote, right? So, whether you're mad as heck when you pull that lever or, you're chill and laid back, it doesn't matter. It's still one vote. But enthusiasm means you're going to stand in that long line, no matter how cold or rainy it is that day. You're going to take people to the polls. You're going to, be enthusiastic about talking to friends and so forth about this. The other thing is that I think that is not being measured is people are starting to connect the lockdown rules to political objectives. So, we are being locked down to further political aims, right? So if that calculation sets in amongst the voters, It's like the mask. Some people are willing to wear the mask, but I don't know anybody who likes it. I don't know anybody who likes still being locked down. I don't know anybody who's in favor. They may say, there are people out there who say, it's too dangerous for kids to go to school right now, but they're not in favor of them sitting home. And if you show them that, hey, it's not dangerous, they would in a heartbeat say, put the kids in school, right? So, they're losing some battles that they don't really understand. And I think that that's going to come back to haunt them. The longer this goes on, and the longer these Democrat state and local leaders keep imposing sanctions on people, the better that looks for Trump saying, elect me and you will be free of this. Because I think we all know that November 4th, virtually everybody is going to be cured of COVID.
One of the things that drives me absolutely up a wall, because I hear this over and over again, is just that, the United States has been the worst country in the world in handling the response to the coronavirus. And I'm like,
absolutely untrue. We've been better than all of Europe, most of Asia, and the parts of Asia that report better numbers than us, are probably lying.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was some chart I had meant to go and look it back up, but I remember I think it was about a week ago, and it was showing, I think the deaths per capita, or they had something, that was trying to put it into perspective. And the U.S. was like right in the middle of the pack or something like that, But as you're saying, like Italy and all these other European countries, they were right there at the top. I said, so how do these news people, theoretically news people, or are they actually looking at any of this, or is it, once again, or does it go back to the thing I've been saying for months, which is that all they are paying attention to is that we've had 5 million infections and we've had 150,000 plus deaths, and they keep focusing in on that, without any other context about positivity rates.
I go on there and say, every time someone says, hey, 150,000 dead, how does Trump justify that? And I'm like, okay, the prediction was 2.5 million. So that means Trump is at 7.5% of the prediction, right? So we've cut out 92.5% of the deaths so far, right? That's pretty good. And we did not lose a single American for lack of PPE, ventilators, beds, meds, or medical providers. Not one. We had enough of everything. And that's really what Trump did, was wheeled and dealed and got everybody the supplies they needed, right? And then managed it so we could get past the hump, right? And bend the curve and so forth. So, the things he actually is supposed to do in this, because he doesn't, the federal government doesn't own or run these hospitals or set their policies, right? And the federal government doesn't run the state emergency preparedness stuff. Those are run by states. But the things he was in charge of have been the only things that have truly been taken care of properly. So I think he deserves a ton of credit for coronavirus response. And I think you have to remember that, the Democrats don't want to talk about the perspective, like 160,000 or 150,000, whatever it is, out of what, right? They don't want to talk about any, double reporting of positives and, people test negative and it comes out, 100% positivity rate of that testing site. And people didn't even take the test and got declared positive and so forth. So, there's a lot of chicanery going on to cook these numbers, and a lot of just, you're turning over a pretty complex task to, a lot of the people are highly qualified, but there's so many people doing it that not all of them are, right? It's an emergency. It's like, anytime there's an emergency thing, some of the people who are out there helping you with the emergency don't really know what they're doing. They're just trying to help, right? And some people are experts on it. So that's part of what's happening. So you have some numbers that I think most people agreed, or most sensible people would agree, are at least a little puffed up. But you also have, it was supposed to be 2.5 million. It's not close to 2.5 million. It's not going to be close to 2.5 million. It's down. It's back down after the second surge into the 400 or 500 a day.
Right, and you have things like, you have Governor DeWine. He tests positive before Trump comes to visit, and then they retest him and he's negative. Right. And I just had I had a family over for dinner this past week. They're he's an Air Force nurse. He was at Walter Reed. His next assignment's out in California, so they're starting a journey, which I guess by Friday they should be in California in the Sacramento area. But he was saying, he says that he was convinced that because of the incentives the government gave to the hospitals, that there was also, reporting on COVID deaths that were driven by money, not the real condition of why the person probably would have died. If they had COVID, but this, that's how they was going to get reported, even though they had other underlying conditions that were probably probably responsible for the death. But if given the option and getting a chance to get a little bit bigger payout,
right.
then they were going to go with that. And we talked about that a long time ago as well.
Right.
So a lot of different things. Now, when the thing too about, you mentioned the long lines of voting and stuff like that, we're headed into a period where there's going to be a lot of mail-in voting. Trump has been fighting against this as much as possible. Just this morning, an article appeared in the Deseret News in Utah about young people and mail-in voting. And they said, they're eager to vote, but there's a problem. They don't have the resources. They're not prepared to do this. And they went through an example of a guy who, he wanted to register to vote online, but he didn't. I guess he's a transplant. So he has a driver's license that's not a Utah driver's license right now. And it's not coming up for renewal anytime soon, but you need a Utah driver's license to register to vote in Utah. So he couldn't do that. And then he said, well, I could do this and fill out this other form, but then I need to find a printer. I really rarely use a printer anymore. And they just, a lot of other things. And then just people just baffled at the form and all of these things. So, there are going to be some issues. I mean, Utah has been a mail-in voting state. And they've had, I guess, a fairly decent track record. But now other people, there's a lot of other issues going on here with that. Also with your favorite organization, the United States Postal Service, which the liberals have been going after, Trump, because he has a postmaster general. This guy's name is Louis DeJoy.
Yeah.
He had donated $2.7 million to the Trump campaign. He's been in the position since the middle of June, I guess, and he's trying to reform and reorganize the Postal Service. And the liberals, the Postal Workers Union, are like, no, we're going to have all these problems. There's already delays in your mail and all these things. They're saying that are bad, and they're trying to tie it as a Jamie Lee Curtis tweeted out she saw a postal truck on a flatbed trailer. She says, I think the driver might have been wearing a red cap with white lettering. Is that being too conspiratorial? Just this typical Hollywood nonsense, from the liberal left. But I mean, what's going on here? From your opinion,
Well, in the case of DeJoy, he's ran a logistics company. What he has done, he's come in, he spent about a month talking to all the stakeholders, trying to figure out what to do, how to turn it around. He found out that one of the things, the Postal Service spends about $200 million a year on what they call late trips or extra trips, so your carrier goes out to, I saw your thing about getting mail on Sunday the other day. Your carrier goes out to deliver mail. If mail got put in some other carrier's sack by mistake or fell on the floor or hadn't gotten quite processed yet, they come back and they make another trip to deliver that mail. And so, what DeJoy is saying is we're not doing any more extra trips. We spent a ton of money on that. So get all the money, get all the mail in the sack the first time, sort it correctly the first time, get it done by the time the carrier is supposed to leave the first time. So, and he says, and until we get ourselves oriented to having the mail in the bag for the carrier to leave on time, some mail's going to get left behind. It won't get delivered till the next day. But you're sitting there looking at that mail on the floor, that'll be its own motivation for you to get the mail done on time, get stuff done on time. He's like, part of it is, there's union work rules and whatnot. It's like we give ourselves X amount of time to do something, and then we don't accomplish it in that period of time. So that's one of his chief areas he's going to attack. He also reassigned, got rid of, whatever you want to say, 23 of the top executives, including the top 2 are in charge of day-to-day operations, one of whom was a Democrat who's actively working against, any kind of postal reform, doesn't understand, will not admit to the problems. I think he does fully understand them, and had been a thorn in their side. He was on the Postal Board of Governors. He was forced out of that. Now he's forced out of his day-to-day leadership situation. And I think that that getting rid of that one thorn in the side will make a lot of difference for the Postal Service. It'll allow reform to happen. The Democrats are attacking it. He's not saying anything about post. In fact, he assured, he had his first quarterly earnings call where he gets on a big conference call and goes through the earnings and what they did bad and what they could do better and so forth the other day. And one of the things he said is, we are ready if there's mail-in voting. We're ready to staff up. They've basically been at well above normal staffing levels for a long time because since the pandemic started, it's been like Christmas in terms of package delivery. They've done Christmas season-esque loads of package delivery throughout the pandemic, right? We just now order everything at home and just sit here and wait on it to show up. And every one of those packages is a loss for the post office. In fact, about 40%, it could be as much as 40% loss, right? Whatever they charge, it costs about 40% more to handle the delivery. So he has a long way to go. And they lost 2.2 million in the last quarter. They're going to lose about 8 billion. I said 2.2 million, 2.2 billion. And they're going to lose about 8 billion this year. But I think that, you're going to start seeing those numbers come down because, he's serious about efficiency in a way, that the previous leadership, which was kind of cozy with the unions, was not.
Yeah, it sounds like the joy, maybe the first, Postmaster General to really want to attack the problem and is willing to take on the unions and things like this. The Postal Service, they need to be as automated as possible. They don't need all those people. And frankly, they don't need all the post offices that we have necessarily either, right?
Well, that's a hard place to cut. Okay?
Right, it is. It is a hard place.
It really is, because there's the constituency to every single post office, right? And there was in a hearing one day, right? And Mike Enzi, senator from Wyoming, he questioned the Postmaster General, was Megan Brennan at that time, about why is it that, if you mail something to Wyoming, it goes to a distribution center in Logan, Utah, and then, which is right up in the north part of the state, right close to the Wyoming border.
Right.
It's sorted there and then taken into why can't we have our own regional bulk mill center, instead of using the one in Logan, Utah? So when you go to reduce anything in the Postal Service, that's what you're up against. This thing happens to be 20 miles across the border, and that drives him nuts, right? Why can't we have one, in our actual state? Well, it doesn't matter. The truck can cross the border with your mail, right? It doesn't matter where that post office is if you get your mail on time. So there's a lot of resistance to that. But he is talking about, what the post office needs to do is truly calculate what it costs to deliver packages, right? So now what they do is they mix the cost, when they're assessing the cost of it, they're using the same trucks that, they're bringing your first class mail to, the things they have a monopoly on, and they don't account for it, right? And so they end up really undercharging for packages. For instance, the Amazon deal, now it's been reworked a little, it's not as bad as it was, but they were charging Amazon $2 a package, and it cost them $3.46 to deliver the packages. Now that's that's almost, that's a 70%, loss on every package. Like the more you deliver, the worse you are. So, they're not going to get out of the package business, and they shouldn't. And there's the market advantages there. They're the only ones with a true last mile delivery network that covers the whole country, 170 million addresses a day, 6 days a week. He also assured that it would still be 6 days a week and that they would still make it to every address every day. So a lot of these fears they're having, and he also said they were ready for mail-in voting. So, a lot of these fears that are being brought up against this guy is just political rhetoric.
All right, we are getting low on time, so I want to go to one more thing here, which is just the other news that's out there, which is on the stimulus relief. Congress and the Republicans in the Senate, couldn't come to an agreement. I guess the Democrats have gone off on a recess. They're not scheduling any kind of vote until the 14th of September. Republicans are pretty ticked off about that. Trump got ticked off enough about it, and he went through with his threat. He signed executive orders to suspend, defer the payroll tax, to put up $400 a week roughly, add on to the for the unemployment benefit that had just expired, where the $600 extra had expired, things like that. Democrats, Pelosi, Schumer, the media, they said, well, that's unconstitutional, but not sure that they're really going to challenge that in court. And I thought one thing that was interesting about this was that, Chris Wallace did ask Nancy Pelosi, he's like, didn't you make a mistake here? She didn't take that very well at all. Being called on the carpet for having maybe, misplaying their hand doesn't come out making her look very good. But, what about this EO? Did he do the right thing there? And, are we going to get another stimulus at some point?
Well, it's brilliant politics, because if you oppose it, if you try to, you're right, they're not serious about suing over it, right? But if you oppose it, then you're opposing people getting $400 a week. You're opposing a moratorium on kicking people out who can't pay their rent. You're opposing interest relief on student loan payments, right? I mean, so you can oppose it. The other side of that is at some point he's done some things that call for spending money. He's going to have some congressional approval to do it. So, a deal of some shape is in our future. But meanwhile, it will be very hard for Democrats to say, they're like, oh, unconstitutional. And, Trump says, I'm trying to help you. They're raising, arcane legal issues. And it's going, you're going to be explaining, and, politics, when you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah, I mean, though I will say that, and it seems that Trump, he loves this idea of, suspending, deferring, whatever, the payroll tax. But to me, that's not a really broad-based solution. That's fine for those that are employed and collecting a paycheck. But there are other questions about that, because it wasn't clear to me whether or not this was basically saying, don't collect it beginning in September, and it's going to be forgiven, versus don't collect it but pay it back later, which would be a huge problem.
Right. But what is getting said, though, is, I think his assumption is, right, who's going to vote? How are you going to vote to make everybody pay it back? Right.
Yeah. When
it comes up next year, they'll find a way to pay for that, and you'll never have to pay it.
Yeah. All right. 2 minutes.
2 minutes. So everybody is out of the college football business except the SEC, which is holding on for now and still trying to play its season. Means too much money to them. They're also talking to colleges that are not in the SEC, saying, join our league for just this year. Like some of the people, like Penn State is in the Big Ten. The Big Ten is canceled its season. Penn State, Nebraska, Oklahoma. There's a few of them out there that they're talking about joining the SEC for one season just so they can play. It's time for this to end. It's time to play sports. It's time to go to school. It's time to quit fear-mongering people for no reason.
Yeah. So does this mean that the ACC and the Big 12 also suspended then?
The Big 12 has. I don't know about the ACC. They're still trying to hang around, and they have some strong supporters, including Clemson, which basically is the bell cow of the district of the conference, saying they want to play.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys. I mean, they take risks all the time. I mean, every play you run in football, you could break your neck or worse. I've seen a guy die in a football game, right? When I was in Louisiana. So, I mean, every time you go out there, there's some risk involved, and they all know that, and they all accept it. They all accept that probably in the long term, when they're 40 or 50 or 60 years old, things are going to hurt them that don't hurt anybody else because of having played football. Okay. But they're willing to do that. Right. And so you're saying, but this virus that has almost no chance of being a serious injury to any serious illness for any of them should shut down the season. You know, you have to ask, like, what is behind the decisions to keep all this stuff closed, right? Because it doesn't seem to matter all that much if they get sick. And when it's Democrat priorities, they're getting people out of the house, so you want to go protest or riot or whatever, no one seems worried about the social distancing and mask and all that then, right? Because it's not, it's, you know, it's their priorities.
All right. Now I will just say this, is that I had some fun on Twitter when I commented on an ABC story about the high school, the picture of the crowded hallway. And I basically said, well, it's going to happen. I mean, this is, you know, this fear mongering that you're mentioning, this is part of, you know, should they have figured out a little bit better way of getting the crowd through the hall? Maybe so. But boy, I tell you, it was hilarious to get the flood of responses back from the left, from, you know, saying, you know, well, you know, send your kids out there to do that, or I hope you get the virus and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, I just loved it. I mean, I was getting enough responses that at one point in time, I got a message from Twitter saying, you're getting a lot of responses. Would you like to filter them? And gave me these options to filter the responses.
Yeah,
and
I've had that before too.
I thought this is just too funny, you know. It's just like, but it just shows you how just, you know, unhinged the left is with stuff. So
also along those lines, the Russians say they have a COVID vaccine,
yeah,
and Putin says that he got his daughter to take it. So. Yeah. You know, it must be rough being the president's kid. I always think of that as a position of privilege. It's like, oh, you got to try the drugs.
You're my guinea pig.
Sure, Dad.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining me again today, Brian. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us and sticking with us. Please, as always, stay safe, stay well. Do not let anyone tell you that we do not live in the greatest country in the world, because we do by a far and wide measure. And also, God bless America. We will see you again next week. We're off. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, I was going to say, so, you know, download the, I don't know if you've used it before, but sign up for the Telegram app. And that's what we're using to communicate for Accuracy in America.
Okay.
So just do that, and then I'll create a group with you, me, Doug, and Spencer.
Okay.
Okay.
I will do it.
All right. Talk to you again.
All right.
See you. Bye-bye.